It seems that among regular viewers of this series, there's a demand for me to talk about one tree in particular, due to a joke which is probably older than I am. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Larch. It's a Monty Python episode where they keep going on about number whatever it is, the Larch. It's Monty Python fans, bring it up on all occasions, you know what they're like. Now that we've got that out of our system, it's worth pointing out that the larch isn't actually a British native tree. It was probably the first tree that was used for commercial forestry in the UK. It was brought here around 1620 and planted all over Scotland as a means of timber production. And so since then it's been planted elsewhere and has naturalised in some areas, but frankly it doesn't really belong here as a species. That's a shame because I quite like larches. Larches in Europe are fairly feeble, boring trees. They grow on poor ground. Similarly in North America they tend to be rubbish trees of rocky areas or flooded ground. But in Far East Europe, where I do most of my work, the larch is king. There are vast, extensive forests where the local species of larch, which is a different one to the one we see in Europe, covers all the hills, all the valleys. It is the dominant tree. It grows up to heights of around 40 metres with these gigantic trunks. And so there, larch is a proper tree, whereas over here, it never really gets very big, it's never very important. There's another funny story about larches, and that's a particular trait of the European larch, which is that it's deciduous. In other words, it sheds its leaves in the winter, its leaves or its needles. When it does so, before it sheds them, like many deciduous trees, they go a bright colour of yellow, often before the rest of the trees around them have turned it themselves. Now, a few years ago in eastern Germany, northeastern Germany, they discovered a patch of forest that had been planted in the 1930s probably, that took advantage of this special property of larches, and in amongst a hillside that was otherwise covered in pines, they'd planted a series of larches in the pattern of a swastika. Now, no one noticed this until people started flying over it and taking aerial photos, because you had to catch it at just the right time of year when the larch needles would go yellow before the pine, and so you'd get this blazing yellow swastika on the side of a hill. Obviously, as soon as people noticed it, it became a bit of a local scandal, and so the larch trees sadly were cut down for being associated with fascism, which is a bit of a shame because I'm sure it's not actually the tree's fault.